Welcome. Welcome to Touching the Edge. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm so happy to be here with you because I'm determined to find a more clear relationship to alignment. We know that if we take a photograph, if it's not quite aligned, if it's a little bit out of focus, it almost gives us a headache. It just doesn't feel right if we don't have that sharp relief of alignment. And I want to suggest that's the way it is in life as well. To me, it's very interesting. We often talk about the cosmic jewel. Like if you turn the jewel just a little bit, you see a different facet. We recognize that everything's a mirror for everything else. Everything's a metaphor. If you learn something well, you can apply it to other things. If you learn chess well, you can apply those principles to life. But even in elements like when we talk about entertainment, and I really am not much for horror entertainment, although I used to be when I was growing up. But I remember reading the book It by Stephen King, and then also seeing the original TV series or the miniseries It with Tim Curry, and Tim Curry was so great, and I love Tim Curry in general. But even in this last one, they did it a number of years ago as a couple of movies, and then they also did this thing. I think it's called Welcome to Derry, which is a continue and a deepening of the story. And so we have this character, the creature, the whatever you might call it, Pennywise. It comes framed as a clown, but it's actually some kind of force that feeds on creating fear. And so, the way that it really tries to really, focus itself is to become exactly what the individual that it's stalking, that element, that individual, it shows up as the fear that person has. It morphs itself into the fear. It shapes itself into that fear. It's very specific. And it's interesting for me because it reminds me of what we describe as worry. Worry, when you have someone who gets into that sort of focused relationship to worry, it's the same way. It morphs itself into different things. Worry becomes exactly what we're afraid of. We find ourselves being hyper vigilant. We find ourselves imagining everything that could go wrong. It's very much like that Pennywise character. It's interesting to me as well because many times what happens as we're growing up, just like in the show, the original show or the first part of the show is the kids. These kids are battling this creature. And isn't that the way it works for us in our own lives? At a certain point, we don't feel like we fit in. We feel really, uncomfortable with ourselves. And gradually we find our skills. Maybe we find our way of moving through the world. We find our confidence. But very often, what ends up happening eventually is that worry begins to mount again. That worry that we were so sort of worried by, the disappointment we're so disappointed by, begins to build itself again as we grow older. Sometimes we lose those skills. Maybe our physical beauty is not the same as it was. I want to suggest you're equally beautiful as ever, but maybe differently beautiful. Or maybe we're not able to do those capabilities. Playing basketball, whatever it might be. I saw the great Eckhart Tolle. He was talking one time, and he was talking about having, someone who maybe had an incredibly beautiful body, and he said, and this too shall pass. And so what ends up happening is we get to another stage of our life, and we come to that point that Bob Marley was describing: once a man and twice a child. Once a man and twice a child, and everything is just for a while. So even the skills and the gifts, we find out they're loaned to us. And then eventually what ends up happening is those childhood worries begin to show themselves again. Will I be abandoned? Am I going to be targeted? What's going to happen? And so I want to suggest to you that just as in this show, we want to recognize that it's the worry is morphing into these different versions. That it's really forms of imagination. We end up finding that Pennywise is actually some element of our own imagination. And if we can actually use our imagination rather than having our imagination use us, if we can apply our imagination rather than letting our worry apply our imagination, I want to suggest to you that whatever we're worried about, and it's two separate things. There's the issue and then there's the worry. And I want to ask you to really recognize, if you can step up to the worry, you change your relationship to the issue. Don't let the worry fool you into thinking it is what it's presenting itself to be. Calm your nervous system every single day. Work with the 10 state changers and apply those ways that you work to calm your nervous system. And then begin to ask yourself positive questions. Begin to use visualizations. Use your imagination to visualize where you want to go, not where you're afraid of. So, I just want to suggest, recognize you have the power to take the power away from worry. It's not this thing that it seems to be. It's actually something very small if we don't grow it with our own imagination. I'm going to ring the bell. I'm going to ring the bell and ask you to listen carefully. So here we go. Once a man and twice a child. And yet, if we step into the right relationship to life, we realize that we were born to be as children, to be trusting, not trapped in worry. Thank you so much for joining. Please let other people know about these videos. Let's grow this circle, and I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day.